Regardless of how you might feel about this particular law, this is not how laws should be passed in a free and democratic society. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, another day in lockdown, which means it's another car vlog. Now, for those of you who may not know, Justin Trudeau just announced a ban on over 1,500 types of military-grade assault weapons in Canada. And for those of you who may not know, Justin Trudeau is the Prime Minister of Canada. Prime Minister is sort of like the American President of Canada. And for those of you who may not know, Canada is that country to the north of the United States. So Justin Trudeau quite literally overnight with the stroke of a pen outlaws some 1,500 types of military-grade assault weapons.
Today, we are closing the market for military-grade assault weapons in Canada. We are banning 1,500 models and variants of these firearms by way of regulations. These weapons were designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time. There is no use and no place for such weapons in Canada. So, effective immediately, it is no longer permitted to buy, sell, transport, import, or use military-grade assault weapons in this country.
And with that news, my Twitter account, my DMs, my email starts filling up with requests to do a vlog on the subject. And incidentally, we just reached 200,000 subscribers on this channel, which is amazing. It is an honor, and I consider it to be a responsibility. So tweets and DMs are coming in on Twitter, DMs are coming in on Instagram and Facebook, comments are in the comment section on my YouTube videos. I'm getting emails to the effect that people want me to cover this subject. These messages started coming in 3 to 4 days ago, and like I've said in previous vlogs, I'm pretty good at knowing when I know I don't know something. I am a Quebec attorney, although I never specialized in constitutional law, and I actually took the firearm safety course in Quebec last summer just for my own personal knowledge. All that to say is that I had enough information to know what I didn't know, so I spent the last 3 days boning up on the subject so I could do a vlog on it. I'm also trying to line up live streams with people who I know more than me on the subject, but first things first, baby steps.
Baby steps? It means setting small, reasonable goals for yourself, one day at a time.
What is going on? Well, the first thing to know is that our federal government is not sitting as it ordinarily would to govern, given the My Sharona Cyrus schmandrick that has us all in a blockdown. As a result of the My Sharona Cyrus, our federal government has actually moved to reduced in-person sittings in their governance of our country, and that should make this all the more egregious. But despite the reduced in-person sittings, Justin Trudeau overnight came in with a sweeping ban on over 1,500 military-grade assault rifles. How did that happen? Well, this is what our neighbors to the south might not fully understand. This didn't come by way of legislation that was debated and passed. This came by way of what is called an order-in-council. And what is an order-in-council? I'll read you the legalese and then I'll break it down simply. A federal order-in-council is a statutory instrument by which the Governor-General, the executive power of the government in council, acting on the advice and consent of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada, expresses a decision. In practice, orders in councils are drafted by cabinet and formally approved by the Governor-General. Orders in council are not discussed by Parliament and do not require legislation by Parliament before being implemented. Translation in non-legalese, orders in councils are unilateral decrees by the government making something law without any parliamentary debate. To simplify it even more, it is law because I said so. When it comes to orders in council, there are no bills that are drafted, there is no parliamentary debate. There is the Governor-General who is appointed by the Prime Minister saying, it is law, therefore it is law. So just like that, quite literally overnight, in the context of a global schmandrick, when the federal government is at reduced sittings, in the wake of Canada's deadliest mass shooting, Justin Trudeau comes in and says, unilaterally, by decree, order of council, I am banning over 1,500 types of military-grade assault rifles. And the legislation in virtue of which he derives that authority is found in our criminal code. Section 117.15.1, subject to subsection 2, the governor in council may make regulations prescribing anything that by this part is to be or may be prescribed. Restriction. In making regulations, the governor in general may not prescribe anything to be a prohibited firearm, a restricted firearm, a prohibited weapon, a restricted weapon, a prohibited device, or prohibited ammunition, if, in the opinion of the governor in council, the thing to be prescribed is reasonable for use in Canada for hunting or sporting purposes. Non-legalese translation, the governor in council may not, by order in council, ban anything that is reasonable for use in hunting or for sporting purposes in Canada. Flip side translation, the governor in council may, by order in council, ban anything that they deem to be not reasonable for use for hunting or sporting purposes in Canada. And you don't need to be a trained lawyer or jurist to predict what Justin Trudeau's justification is going to be for this order in council banning over 1,500 types of military-grade assault rifles. So by virtue of this order in council, in the absence of any parliamentary debates, while the federal government is at reduced sitting in the context of this My Sharona Cyrus Schmendrick, this has just become law. Canada Gazette, Part 2, Ottawa, Friday, May 1, 2020. Whereas the governor in council is not of the opinion that anything prescribed to be a prohibited firearm or prohibited device in the annexed regulations is reasonable for use in Canada for hunting or sporting purposes. And now we see the full power of ambiguously drafted and purely discretionary legislation. As drafted, the legislation gives the governor in council pure discretionary power to outlaw by order in council any weapon that they deem to be not reasonable for use for hunting or sporting purposes in Canada. And just like that, the governor in council appointed by Justin Trudeau says, I deem these things to be not reasonable for use for hunting or sporting purposes in Canada, and it becomes law. Therefore, Her Excellency the Governor General in Council, on the recommendation of the Minister of Justice, pursuant to the definitions non-restricted firearm, prohibited device, prohibited firearm, and restricted firearm in subsection 84.1 of the Criminal Code, and to subsection 117.15 of that Act, makes the annexed regulations amending the regulations prescribing certain firearms and other weapons, components, and parts of weapons, accessories, cartridge magazines, ammunition, and projectiles as prohibited, restricted, and non-restricted. And then the amendments go on to list the 1,500 military-grade assault-style weapons from A to Z. And when I say from A to Z, I mean from A to Z literally. Now, for those of you who may not know, gun ownership is already extremely regulated in Canada. It is very difficult to get a firearm legally. In Canada, you have restricted firearms, you have non-restricted firearms, and you have prohibited firearms. And there is a course that you have to follow in order to get a restricted firearm. There is a course you have to follow in order to get a non-restricted firearm, and prohibited firearms you just can't own. The courses are long, 1 to 2 days, sometimes more. You have to pass a test, you have to pass background checks, you have to get authorization from your spouse. There are severe restrictions and penalties on storing weapons in Canada, on transporting weapons in Canada. There are already restrictions on the firearms themselves. I believe a pistol can't hold more than 10 rounds and a rifle can't hold more than 5 rounds. So gun ownership is already highly regulated in Canada to begin with. And with this order in council, Justin Trudeau literally comes in overnight and says all of these guns that people may have owned are now illegal to transport or use in Canada, period. Now, one of the initial problems with this order in council is that in Canada, there is no definition for an assault-style weapon. And so many feel that this list of prohibited weapons is absolutely arbitrary in that it bans certain weapons but doesn't ban others which are virtually identical in function and design. Other people point out that while this might look good on paper, Justin Trudeau just banned over 1,500 military-grade assault-style weapons, it really only covers about 15 to 20 types of weapons and multiple variations of those weapons. But it is what it is. Licensed legal gun owners who have been holding these weapons for however long after having taken the courses, passed the test, and gotten the permits now see these weapons banned as totally illegal in Canada. They cannot use or transport them, period. But legal gun owners, don't worry, because apparently there's going to be a 2-year amnesty period during which the government is going to draft legislation as to what to do with these weapons. There's going to be a buyback of these weapons. Apparently there's something like 87,000 of these weapons throughout Canada, and apparently the buyback might cost upwards of $600 million, if not $1 billion or more. The government spending $1 billion in taxpayer dollars to buy back these weapons, and from what I understand, they're going to be buying them back at a fraction of the cost. Which, if you actually think about it this way, means that law-abiding gun owners who pay taxes to the government are now paying taxes to the government to buy back their weapons for less than what they paid for them. If you are a tax-paying, law-abiding gun owner, I can see that as being somewhat frustrating. But I've got to say, even if one happens to agree with this law in its entirety, this is not how legislation should be passed in a free and democratic society, period. And just to add a little more inconsistency to this order in council, the amnesty period provides as follows. The purpose of the amnesty period is to permit the person to skip to section I. If the specified firearm was on the day before the day on which this order comes into force a non-restricted firearm, use it to hunt in the exercise of a right recognized and affirmed by section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982, or to sustain the person or their family until they are able to obtain another firearm for that use, and for that purpose transport the firearm in accordance with section 10 of the Storage, Display, Transportation, and Handling of Firearms by Individuals regulations. And for those of you who may not know, section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 recognizes and affirms Aboriginal rights. So what this section of the Amnesty Clause provides is that Aboriginal people may nonetheless continue to use these weapons, which the Governor in Council deemed to be not reasonable for use for hunting in Canada, until they can procure a firearm for hunting in Canada that is reasonable for use for hunting in Canada. Now, the purpose of this vlog is not to take sides one way or the other, despite the fact that I do have my opinion on the subject. Some of the things that people are outraged about is the absolute lack of transparency in the issuance of this law. People are outraged about the fact that there is already a tremendous amount of regulation as relates to these firearms in the first place. The Order-in-Council bans firearms that were already limited in terms of their capacity. The Order-in-Council is taking lawfully obtained weapons out of the hands of law-abiding citizens who went through all of the hoops to get those weapons when most of the crime is not committed with lawfully procured firearms. The Order-in-Council outlaws firearms that are actually not responsible for the vast majority of firearm violence in Canada. And the Order-in-Council seems to be purely arbitrary and purely discretionary in terms of what weapons it covers, which it doesn't, and how it was issued in the first place. We'll see where this goes. I suspect there will be a constitutional challenge to this Order-in-Council from what I've seen on social media, but at the very least, this is going to be added to the list of controversial orders-in-council on Wikipedia, that's for certain. I hope I did the subject matter justice, pun intended. If I missed anything or got anything wrong, let me know in the comment section below, but at the very least, this is eye-opening as to how government works in Canada. And with that said, if you like my content, you like my videos, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below because it helps feed the algorithm. If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment, but above all else, take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay healthy, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah.